Hey friends, how you doing? We are at the end of another week and we've been reading through Galatians, and I hope you're enjoying it. I hope the Spirit of God is connecting with you and enlarging in you and deepening your faith and strengthening you as a disciple through the Word. We're in Galatians chapter 4, and remember, one of the main themes of this letter that Paul wrote is freedom. You are a free people. If you're in Christ, you are free. You are no longer enslaved to the principles of the world. You're no longer enslaved to the law or to sin or to Satan. You are free. And in chapter 4, Paul says one of the reasons you can consider yourself to be free is because you are a child of God. You're not a slave. In verse 7, he says this: you are no longer a slave, but a son. You are no longer a slave, but a son. We can live in freedom because our relationship with God is not one of a slave to a master. Instead, it's one of a child to a father. There is so much freedom in the relationship between a child and a father. The relationship between a slave and a master is restrictive. It's suppressive. It's harsh. It's strict. But when it comes to a child and a father, it's love, it's joy, it's freedom, it's forgiveness, it's grace, it's patience. You are children of God, not slaves of a master, Paul says. And he says again in verse 4, this is stunning to me. Verse 6, because you are sons, verse 6, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. God has sent his Spirit into our hearts, and the Spirit within us cries out, Abba, Father. There's one other place in the New Testament where those two words belong together. Mark chapter 14, where Jesus, on the night before he was crucified, went to pray in Gethsemane in a moment of anguish and turmoil and deep pain. Jesus, we're told in Mark chapter 14, knelt down on the ground and he said, Abba, Father. It's this moment of intense intimacy and raw honesty where Jesus says to God, Abba, Father. And now the Apostle Paul is saying, you too can cry out to God in the very same way that Jesus cried out to God. You too have access to God in the same way that Jesus had access to God. You too can experience that level of intimacy that Jesus experienced with his Father. This is astonishing. This is stunning. Jesus, who lived in perfect intimacy and joy and harmony with the Father for all of eternity, now invites you and me to live in that same level of intimacy, invites us into that relationship. And so as you come before God today, just spend a few moments reflecting on those two words, Abba, Father. Abba, Father. Reflect on the intimacy of that language. Reflect on the closeness. Reflect on what it might mean for the way you can approach and the way you can pray and the way you can speak to and with God. Abba, Father. See, you're no longer a slave, but you're a child. I'd love you to take some time today, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, to get alone, to get quiet, and just reflect on those two words, Abba, Father. Abba, so powerful, and it will bless you. Have a great weekend. I'll see you again next week.